Oh dear god, what monstrosity have I created this time? G'day ladies and gents, Cubic Meter here. Now something that I've always loved about this game, we can take something terrifying and destructive like a wither, trap it using some funky alignments with entities like boats, and then give it a handy utility such as breaking obsidian automatically. However, the art of trapping withers to make them do our bidding has changed a lot over the years. In fact, this particular arrangement of wither cage only works up to 1.15. With a bit of digging, I found that this particular design goes all the way back to CCS Covenant from the Chinese technical community. So what about trapping withers in later versions such as in 1.17? Amazingly, the boat alignments trick still actually contains the wither. However, it is able to still fire projectiles. Fortunately, if the wither is locked onto a target, it will constantly try to shoot the skulls directly at that target. And so we can simply redirect the skulls into another object such as this cobblestone wall. And this here represents a really exciting time in my history playing this game. Back before I was a technical player, I used to play in a 1.7 modded faction server. And this self-repairing cobblestone wall is just one of the concepts that I learned from playing factions. In order to build the self-repairing wall, all you need is some water columns like so. And then, in a cavity behind the water, you'll need to have a lava source block for each space, which will immediately generate cobblestone whenever it gets damaged. So make sure that each space in the wall has a lava source, that way it actually flows outwards to generate the cobblestone. And then voila! You have a self-regenerating wall. And if I go ahead and activate extreme behaviors, you'll see that it forms the perfect target to absorb the hits from our wither. There we go, as you see, just got hit by a blue skull and repaired itself immediately. I can tick warp this for hours and hours and hours, and blue skull after blue skull after blue skull, it always self-repairs. So that's awesome! We can make reliable wither cages for 1.17. Let me quickly go through the details of how to set up this wither cage. First of all, let's get rid of our iron golem and our wither. Although that's probably a lot harder to do in survival. It's perhaps easiest to make the bubble fountain using ice blocks like so, and make sure you fill up all these stairs with water. And here comes the boat alignment. Pick up a boat in a minecart like so, and once it gets down here, you can then push it around by standing on top of it until it aligns to these chests. Then go ahead and place down another boat and have it land on top. Get in the boat and move it around until it's pushed right up against the chest. Make sure you have an iron golem over here for the wither to target, and now you're ready to construct the wither. Make sure once the wither's formed, place down a water bucket on this fence post and run and hide so that the wither does not target you if you're in survival. Once the wither has formed, you can go back over to it, remove the water in the fence post, hit it with a snowball, and make sure the wither does not continue targeting you if you're in survival. And now you have a fully formed wither cage. So the way that this wither cage actually works is that these boats have a solid hitbox that prevents the wither from flying upwards. However, because they are entities and not blocks, they do not get damaged by the wither's attack. At the bottom, these walls don't actually occupy the space which is at risk of getting destroyed when the wither is damaged. However, these walls have part of their hitbox actually protrude into the space above, meaning if the wither can't fly upwards because of the boats, and can't fly sidewards because of the walls, you have your wither fully contained. And by ensuring that the iron golem is slightly off center, I don't even have to worry about containing the wither from the back, because the wither is trying to move directly towards the target. So I can even place down water like this, pushing it in completely the opposite direction, but the wither's motion is so strong that it fights against it. So essentially, the wither is forcing itself right up against these walls. And I can go ahead and punch the wither. You can see the wither automatically corrects itself. All of this is very important for the next step of actually using our wither to farm obsidian. Possibly the easiest way to do this is by using the platform that generates in the end. All you really need in the overworld is a simple hopper clock, which dispenses items into an end portal, which you would probably chunk load using either a portal-based chunk loader or an alternative account. In order to actually run the farm, however, you will need to have the player present in the end dimension. Now there is one slight problem with this farm which I will now demonstrate in survival. If I go through this end portal, when I first load the chunks, the withers will immediately retarget the closest entity, which was the player who literally just went through the portal. What I need to do is, the moment I go to the end dimension, I need to look up and get out of range of the withers as quickly as possible. And as you can tell, this is rather a risky process as the farm literally just broke. I mean, this farm does produce a very respectable 30,000 obsidian per hour, without even needing any complicated hopper minecart alignments. However, all of this is very upset by the fact that every single time a player goes to the end, they need to immediately look up and right click, and if they are not fast enough, they will die very quickly. This is probably not very ideal. Fortunately, however, there is another source of obsidian in the end. Players have always dreamed of the possibility of harvesting the end pillars automatically. And right now, we're finally going to make it possible. So let's first start by looking at the end pillars themselves. There are 10 different kinds of end pillar, all of which generate in the end dimension in a randomized order around the end fountain. They range in size all the way from the chunky boy, which is 103 blocks tall and 6 blocks in radius, all the way down to the skinny 3 block radius, which is 76 blocks tall. Now you might be thinking, in order to maximize our obsidian yields, we should obviously go for the biggest pillar. However, this is not necessarily the case, because all these 10 different sizes of end pillar are randomized based on the seed of your world. And when you actually perform the dragon ritual, the first pillar to get targeted is always the east facing pillar. Of course, we could maximize the amount of obsidian harvested per ritual performed if we just put a wither cage on every single one of these pillars. However, that would be an incredibly difficult project to pull off. So instead, we'll only focus on harvesting the first end pillar facing to the east as quickly as possible. You might also be thinking that it was advantageous to have this extremely tall and wide end pillar. However, the end pillars all have specific regions in which they replace blocks with air around the end pillar. So if I just do the summoning ritual right now, we will see that part of this glass actually gets deleted. We have two regions where blocks are deleted. First of all, there is a square radius around this bedrock block in which all blocks are removed. You also have this second region where blocks are deleted, which goes all the way down to Y66. This will delete any blocks in the square profile of the end pillar above Y level 66 for every single end pillar. This means that Y level 66 is going to be the major limiting point for how tall we can stack up our wither cages. This block deletion is kind of useful, however, as we can use it to detect when the pillar is generated. We can then go ahead and build up our wither cage. We'll have our two chests right here, and of course the boat in a minecart. Eventually what we'll have is a cozy little cubby for our wither. This has been deliberately built with the intention of being able to rotate it and stick it onto any of the four sides of the end pillar. Inside of the chamber, the wither sits right in here, such that it is able to destroy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 obsidian. We do not want the wither to be encased in obsidian every time the tower generates. The reason being, if the wither takes suffocation damage, it could take damage too quickly and start firing blue skulls in random directions which will break the cage. This is why we make absolutely sure that the wither is not taking suffocation damage, and instead we will simply detect when the tower is generated and damage the wither using a dispenser. With the chambers set and ready to go, I can go ahead, place down the soul sand, place down the skulls, hit that fence post with the water bucket. Now a wither will target the iron golem. I can go in, remove the water bucket, just quickly hit the wither with a snowball and run away. Now we have a proper wither cage. Something that you need to be very cautious about is that if you stand in front of the wither and get hit by skulls just like that, the skulls will actually deal blast damage to nearby blocks. This can also be quite problematic if endermen start wandering around your farm. So once we're done here, we'll have to make sure that we thoroughly spawn proof everything so that we don't get endermen wandering around the place. This means it's probably a good idea to double carpet everything to make sure that endermen don't just happen to teleport in here. In order to detect when the pillar is generated, I've just got some water flowing over the top of my observer at that Y66 limit. When we generate the pillar, my weapon of choice to damage the wither is arrows. This is mainly because they stack to 64, unlike snowballs which only stack to 16. This means you can store 4 times the amount of arrows in the same space than you can snowballs. However, you can of course use snowballs if you choose. If I go ahead and do the ritual, the system will detect it, damage the wither, and there we have it. Obsidian comes straight out of the chamber. Now unfortunately, because of the walls inside of the cage, it is possible for items to sometimes fall through to the lower levels. If you only want to build a single layer of the farm, this can be mitigated by simply adding an additional collection system underneath. But before we go adding additional layers to this, we first want to encompass the entire tower. What I'm going to do here is go ahead and select the center of the tower, like so. Select the bottom corner of the regenerating wall and bring my selection down a bit. To also make sure I kill the wither first and prepare it for the wither to be added. There we go, I've got the whole module selected. We go into the center here and copy it and go ahead and rotate it. You'll now be able to align it and then paste it in just like that. Repeating this 4 times and we have our 4 modules all ready to go. I'm just going to go ahead, place down the skull, place down the water bucket, go to the next module. I can now remove that water bucket, punch the wither, repeat it for all 4 of the modules. In order to flush out the chambers, we want to have a water bucket here and 2 water buckets on these stairs. And just like that, we go from only harvesting 12 obsidian per ritual to 48 obsidian per ritual. Let's go ahead and summon our dragon. There we go, generate the obsidian, break it immediately, and send it to a centralized collection. And I should probably cancel that before the dragon spawns. Alright, let's see how much obsidian we got. We got 12, 24, 36, 48. Hey. So now we need our machine to perform the ritual and cancel it automatically. Now this is pretty straightforward. All we need to do is have the player place down some end crystals, and the moment that they generate our east end pillar, we then want to go ahead and break the crystals. Extremely efficient endstone farms will probably go ahead and grab indestructible end crystals to form 3 of the end crystals, meaning you only need to place down 1 crystal. However, in the case that we don't want to spend the effort obtaining indestructible end crystals, a solution to this would be to use 3 regular end crystals and simply move the 4th end crystal far enough away such that they can be safely disposed of. This system right here is perfectly timed to 143 game ticks exactly to generate the first end pillar. And as you can see, we have obsidian just flowing in. So if you do the math, we have 48 obsidian being generated every 143 game ticks, which comes down to about 24,000 obsidian per hour just with these 4 modules. But of course, we're not even scratching the surface of this end pillar. By stacking the modules along the vertical axis of the tower, we can collect even more obsidian per ritual. However, for those of you who just want a reliable and relatively simple obsidian farm and survival, this is likely where you want to leave it. By harvesting the end pillars instead of the end platform, your withers won't be retargeting the player every single time they enter the end dimension. However, this does come with the drawback of spending end crystals to actually generate the obsidian. A price for everything. So let's finally go ahead and turn this farm into absolute insanity. And this is what we get. A dragon ritual is performed every 143 game ticks, which means we generate the pillar every 7 seconds. We have 40 withers destroying 480 obsidian for every end crystal placed, meaning this monstrosity is putting out 240,000 obsidian per hour. Now who on earth would need this much obsidian? Maybe the same people who would need over 70,000 shulker shells per hour. And no, I do not mean Psycraft. In fact, I've had nothing to do with that server for the past few months. I mean WaveTech, the community I'm now a part of and actively working on projects for. Like the new and improved mother of all shulker farms. Anyway, back to farming obsidian. Please excuse the horrific noise, as my volume is literally on 0%. 40 withers all packed together in one place is not very quiet. Now in order to fit all the wither cages together like this, I've had to actually stagger them and mirror them for every layer. So you'll notice that on the first layer we have 1, 2, 3, 4 cages arranged in a radial pattern. And then the next layer is mirrored over to this side. This is of course to prevent withers from targeting the wrong iron golem. These withers are packed so closely together there is only 2 blocks of space between the feet of one wither and the head of the next one. And you might notice that these modules are slightly different to the ones I introduced previously, because this is in fact the very first prototype I made of this obsidian farm. I decided to go ahead and rebuild the modules from scratch to make them a bit more refined, for the smaller scale and much easier to build variant that you'll likely use in survival. In fact, this is very good practice for a technical Minecrafter. To first build a farm, tear it down, and then build it again, just to make absolutely sure you can use previous knowledge and experience to perfect it. If you wanted to try the farm out for yourself, I'll be leaving a world download down the description. Once the thing is built, it's actually very straightforward to use. Just make sure that you have all these chests topped up with shulker boxes full of arrows, flip on this hopper clock, go into this little alcove, aim right at the bedrock there, and hold down right mouse button, and the farm will run automatically. Whenever you stop placing end crystals, you simply won't have the ritual being performed, and therefore the farm will automatically shut off. Just be sure to turn off the hopper clock before you leave the dimension. Of course, in survival, all you really need is a dropper spitting out end crystals at you automatically. So I'll just flip this lever, stare at the bedrock block, and hold down right mouse button. And because everything is detection based off the player placing down end crystals, if you run out of end crystals, the farm will automatically turn off. So there we have it, a reliable way to get large amounts of obsidian in a remote dimension. Thank you very much for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more updates on projects with WaveTech. Until then, I will see you next time.